Hey, good morning. Let's go over today's trade plan. So in the overnight session, we saw failed breakdowns across the board in the S&P, Nasdaq, and the Russell. And since then, the buy side has been dominant and in control on the smaller time frames. Bigger picture, we can see over the last few days, the market has been balancing in a wide range. And heading into today, if that overnight bullish bias continues to be intact, then we can head higher. The first area of resistance is this 52 quarter to 53.75, and then after that we have resistance at 55 to 57.5, which marks yesterday's intraday balance breakdown area, and then beyond that 61.75 to 63 quarter is the launching point of the strong directional move that we saw yesterday. Now, given that the market is trading in a big balance area right now over the last several days, we can still get sellers active on first test of important resistance. So even though overnight the buyers have been very dominant, and again, if that continues, we could test upper areas of resistance, but it doesn't mean that we have to necessarily completely trend back to the upside. So these areas of resistance can still be hurdles along the way, and they can still be, at the very minimum, pause points and reaction points along the way. So it's something to be mindful of, especially if you're either already long or taking any long setups. Just be mindful that these resistance spots can still be hurdles, and sell side can still step in, even if things look bullish on the smaller time frames. Simply because bigger picture, we are in a very two-sided and balanced market, and within a balance, you can get buyers active at support and sellers active at resistance. So on the upside, this is going to be the first hurdle up here around the 52 quarter to 53.75, and if we can cross beyond that, it does serve as a confirmation that buyers are dominant. The next area is going to be right above it at 55 to 57.5, and then if we are able to take that out, then we know that again it's another sign of strength. But 61.75, 63 quarter is significant, and 65 to 67 continues to be significant as well. On the downside, we have the first area of support at 43 to 45, and if the buyers are going to remain in control here, given the action in the overnight session, then ideally you want to see it holding above 43 to 45. Now, because we're trading in a big range, a break of 43 to 45 doesn't necessarily mean that the market is all out bearish. It doesn't mean that sellers are now going to be completely dominant, because we're still trading in a big range. So from there, we can go down and test the 37 to 39 initial support, and we have the overnight low at 35.75. That's still a spot where buyers can step in, and then we have more significant support at 31.5 to 33.5, and that is again still a spot where responsive buyers can defend and step into the market. So right now, the bigger pattern that happens to be in play is that of a failed breakdown in the overnight session, and beyond that, we're in a very balanced two-sided market. So do be mindful of trade location, especially on the long side, because the market's so balanced. If you're entering in the middle of the recent range and there's not sufficient momentum supporting the trade, then that can be quite risky, because even today we can just continue balancing within the last 3 to 4 day range here. So it's important not to get caught up in the short-term volatility or short-term directionality in the market and jump into an emotional trade. If it's moved too far and there's not sufficient reward to risk in the trade, or there's immediate resistance overhead, then even though the market may head a little bit higher, there's not going to be enough reward to risk to justify taking that trade. And similarly, on the downside, if the market has moved too far into support, there may not be anything left to short the market. So, today I think it makes sense to be a little bit more cautious, a little bit more selective. It's the end of the month, end of the quarter. There can be a little bit additional short-term volatility just because of that. So I think it makes a little more sense to be a little more careful and a little more conservative with your trade entries today. And if you're not getting good location or you're not timing the trade correctly, then it's better to let it go rather than chase it one way or the other. I mean, it's never really a good idea to chase, but it's especially a bad idea when the markets are stuck in a balance or in a range, simply because the two-sided activity can continue, and you don't want to get chopped up, on both sides trying to catch a short-term directional move. So it makes more sense to be a little more defensive today with the trade entries. And if you're getting good trade location, then you have the ability to play defense, or I should say you have the ability to correctly play defense. But if you're in from a poor price, then there's really not much you can do. There's really no way to manage a trade that gets initiated from a bad price. But if you're in from good trade location from a key zone, then even if the market kind of whipsaws a little bit or chops around, by being in from good trade location, you are able to sit through that chop and eventually see the trade through. So today, could still continue to be two-sided activity despite the short-term strength that we saw in the overnight session. So sell side can still be active up at resistance, and from there we can start to balance yet again. And if we head lower, unless we're seeing just broad market weakness and a lot of downside momentum, we can still continue to balance within the range. That means that we could perhaps head down into 37.39, or in an extreme case into 31.5 to 33.5. But unless we're getting trend down internals and a complete shift in the overnight momentum, then we could just continue to be stuck within the recent range. So today we are going to be open to both long and short setups, but we're going to be mindful of trade location, and overall we're just going to be a little more selective with the trade setups. So those are the main ideas heading into the open. Let's see if the buy side can maintain the strength that we've seen here in the overnight session, and we'll take it from there.